This is from the Airplane Flying Handbook, Chapter 4, Slow Flight, Stalls, and Spins. The maintenance and lift and control of an airplane in flight requires certain minimum airspeed. This critical airspeed depends on certain factors, such as gross weight, load factors, and existing density altitude. The minimum speed below which further controlled flight is impossible is called the stalling speed. An important feature of pilot training is the development of the ability to estimate the margin of safety above the stalling speed. Also, the ability to determine the characteristic responses of any airplane at different airspeeds is of great importance to the pilot. The student pilot must therefore develop this awareness in order to safely avoid stalls and to operate an airplane correctly and safely at slow airspeeds. Slow flight should be thought of by some as a speed that is less than cruise. In pilot training and testing, however, slow flight is broken down into two distinct elements. One, the establishment, maintenance of, and maneuvering of the airplane at airspeeds and in configurations appropriate to takeoffs, climbs, descends, landing approaches, and go-arounds, and maneuvering at the slowest airspeed at which the airplane is capable of maintaining controlled flight without indications of a stall, usually 3 to 5 knots above stalling speed. Flight at less than cruising airspeeds. Maneuvering during slow flight demonstrates the flight characteristics and degree of controllability of an airplane at less than cruise speeds. The ability to determine the characteristic control responses at the lower airspeeds appropriate to takeoffs, departures, and landing approaches is a critical factor in stall awareness. As airspeed decreases, control effectiveness decreases disproportionately. For instance, there may be a certain loss of effectiveness when the airspeed is reduced from 30 to 20 miles an hour above the stalling speed, but there will normally be a much greater loss as the airspeed is further reduced at 10 miles per hour above stalling speed. The objective of maneuvering during slow flight is to develop the pilot's sense of feel and ability to use the controls correctly and to improve proficiency in performing maneuvers that require slow airspeeds. Maneuvering during slow flight should be performed using both instrument indications and outside visual references. Slow flight should be practiced from straight glides, straight and level flight, and from medium banked gliding and level flight turns. Slow flight at approach speeds should include slowing the airplane smoothly and promptly from cruising to approach speeds without changes in altitude or heading, and determining and using appropriate power and trim settings. Slow flight at approach speed should also include configuration changes such as landing gear and flaps while maintaining heading and altitude. Flight at minimum controllable airspeed. This maneuver demonstrates the flight characteristics and degree of controllability of the airplane at its minimum flying speed. By definition, the term flight at minimum controllable airspeed means a speed at which any further increase in angle of attack or load factor or reduction in power will cause an immediate stall. Instruction in flight at minimum controllable airspeed should be introduced at reduced power settings, with the airspeed sufficiently above the stall to permit maneuvering, but close enough to the stall to sense the characteristics of flight at very low airspeed, which are sloppy controls, ragged response to control inputs, and difficulty maintaining attitude. Maneuvering at minimum controllable airspeed should be performed using both instrument indications and outside visual reference. It is important that pilots form the habit of frequent reference to the flight instruments, especially the airspeed indicator, while flying at very low airspeeds. However, a feel for the airplane at very low airspeeds must be developed to avoid inadvertent stalls and to operate the airplane with precision. To begin the maneuver, the throttle is gradually reduced from cruising position. While the airspeed is decreasing, the position of the nose in relation to the horizon should be noted and should be raised as necessary to maintain altitude. When the airspeed reaches the maximum allowable for landing gear operation, the landing gear should be extended and all gear down checks performed. As the speed reaches the maximum allowable for flap operations, full flaps should be lowered and the pitch attitude adjusted to maintain altitude. Additional power will be required as the speed further decreases to maintain the airspeed just above a stall. As the speed decreases further, the pilot should note the feel of the flight controls, especially the elevator. The pilot should also note the sound of the airflow as it falls off in tone level.